Jake Morrison stood at the center of the massive council chamber, his hands shaking slightly as he held the datapad. The chamber stretched out before him like a metal cathedral, with seats arranged in perfect circles that rose up toward a dome, painted with the symbols of 300 alien species. Only one symbol was missing from that dome: Earth's. For 23 years, Jake had served as humanity's voice in this place. For 23 years, he had spoken with patience and respect, following every rule and custom the galactic community demanded. Today felt different. Today, something inside him was breaking. The Velhari Council members sat in their golden chairs, their pale blue skin gleaming under the chamber lights. Their leader, Zix Thara, barely looked at Jake as she reviewed her own documents. The Kron representatives filled the military section, their massive forms covered in ceremonial armor that clicked and rattled with each movement. Even the smaller species, the ones humanity had tried to befriend, avoided eye contact. Jake cleared his throat and began to read from his prepared statement. His voice echoed in the vast space, but it felt like shouting into an empty void. Honored Council members, I come before you today with urgent concerns about the treatment of human colonies in the Outer Rim territories. Over the past 6 months, Kron military forces have conducted what they call security sweeps on 17 human settlements. These sweeps have resulted in the confiscation of medical supplies, food stores, and essential technology. A few Kron warriors shifted in their seats, but their commander, Gorthmar, stared straight ahead without expression. Jake continued reading, his voice growing stronger. The colony of New Terra reported that Kron forces took medicine meant for sick children. The settlement on Haven's Rest lost 3 months of food supplies. When colonists asked for receipts or compensation, they were told that Deathworld species should be grateful for any attention from their betters. Now Jake looked up from his datapad and spoke directly to the council. These are not security measures. This is theft. This is bullying, and it needs to stop. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the air recycling systems. Then Zix Thara finally looked at Jake, her golden eyes cold and distant. Ambassador Morrison, she said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's sound system. Your species was granted limited participation in galactic affairs as an act of mercy. Your people come from a death world. You are violent by nature. These security measures exist to protect civilized species from potential threats. Jake felt his jaw clench. What threats? Human colonies grow food and mine resources. Our people build homes and raise families. What possible threat do sick children pose to your civilized galaxy? The threat, said Gorthmar, rising to his full height of nearly 3 meters, is in your blood. Deathworlders are unpredictable. Today you grow food. Tomorrow you might decide to grow weapons. We don't want weapons, Jake replied. We want to be left alone to live our lives. Zix Thara made a sound that might have been laughter. Ambassador Morrison, your species has been extended privileges far beyond what most Deathworld inhabitants receive. You have limited trading rights. You can settle on unclaimed worlds. You even have this voice in our council, though of course you cannot vote on important matters. Why can't we vote? Jake asked, though he knew the answer. Because you are not ready for such responsibility. Perhaps in a few centuries, when your people have learned proper civilization, we might consider expanding your privileges. Jake looked around the chamber at the representatives of dozens of species. Most wouldn't meet his eyes. A few looked sympathetic but said nothing. The rest seemed bored by the entire discussion. On the other side of the galaxy, Beth Carter was trying to protect her daughter when the Kron soldiers arrived at New Terra colony. The aliens moved through the settlement like they owned it, taking whatever they wanted and pushing aside any human who got in their way. Beth watched them load medical supplies onto their transport ship. Those supplies were meant to last the colony through the winter months. Without them, people would die. Please, she said to the Kron commander. Those medicines are for the children. Some of them are very sick. The alien looked down at her with eyes like black stones. Deathworlders breed too fast anyway. Consider this population control. Amy Walsh, the colony's head teacher, stepped forward. You can't take medicine from sick children. That's not security, that's murder. The Kron commander's hand moved faster than Beth could see. Amy flew backward and hit the ground hard, blood streaming from her nose. Anyone else want to question? Our authority? The commander asked. Back on Earth, President Lisa Stone received the report about New Terra within hours. She sat in her office reading the details while her advisors waited quietly around the long conference table. How many colonies have been hit this month? She asked. 17, replied Admiral Greg Foster. Same pattern every time. They take what they want and leave. And the Galactic Council's response? They say it's legal under the security accords. Apparently, Deathworld colonies are subject to unlimited inspection and resource requisition for the safety of civilized space. President Stone set down the report and looked at each person around the table. These were people she had worked with for years. They had all spent their careers trying to find peaceful solutions to impossible problems. Greg, she said to the Admiral, tell me about Project Homecoming. Admiral Foster glanced around the table before answering. All systems are ready, Madam President. We've been building and preparing for 15 years just in case this day came. Kate, President Stone turned to General Kate Manning. Our defensive networks? Every human world is protected. The colonies think they're just mining operations and communication arrays, but they're really military installations. We can defend everything we've built, and our true capabilities. Ma'am, General Manning said quietly, if we stop holding back, the galaxy will be very surprised. President Stone nodded slowly. Jake Morrison has been trying to reason with them for over 2 decades. He's a good man, and he's done everything possible to find a peaceful solution. She paused and looked out the window at the city below. But they've made their choice. They want to treat us like animals in a zoo. They want to steal from our children and laugh when we object. She turned back to her advisors. Send a message to Ambassador Morrison. Tell him to deliver one final statement to the Council. After that, he's coming home. What should the statement say? Asked Admiral Foster. President Stone was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady and cold. Tell them we're done being nice. Jake Morrison walked into the Galactic Council chamber for the last time. His footsteps echoed in the vast space as he made his way to the speaking platform. The alien representatives watched him with barely hidden amusement. They thought they knew what was coming. Honored Council, Jake began, his voice clear and steady. I have served as humanity's ambassador for 23 years. In that time, I have asked for fairness. I have asked for respect. I have asked for the basic rights that every sentient species deserves. Zixathara leaned forward in her golden chair. And we have been more than generous, Ambassador Morrison. No, Jake said simply. You have not. He pulled out a small device and placed it on the speaking platform. This message comes directly from the President of Earth and all human colonies. The device projected President Stone's image into the center of the chamber. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight that made even the Kron representatives pay attention. To the members of the so-called Galactic Council, for decades humanity has tried to earn a place among you through patience and cooperation. We followed your rules. We accepted your insults. We allowed you to treat our people as second-class citizens because we believed in the possibility of peace. The projection continued as murmurs began to spread through the chamber. That ends today. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from all galactic accords. We reject your authority over human space and human lives. You have shown us that you understand only strength, so strength is what you will receive. Gorthmar stood up, his armor clanking. Empty threats from Deathworld primitives. One battle group will bring you to heel. President Stone's image seemed to look directly at him. Commander Gorthmar, you are welcome to try. The projection ended, and Jake picked up the device. Good luck, he said to the silent chamber, then turned and walked away. 3 days later, Gorthmar led his battle group toward the human colony of New Terra. 50 ships of the Kron Empire's finest warships approached the small human settlement, expecting to find frightened colonists ready to surrender. Instead, they found Captain Dan Phillips waiting for them. The UES Retribution appeared on Gorthmar's sensors like a ghost materializing from empty space. The human ship was smaller than any Kron warship, its hull a dark gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Unknown vessel," Gorthmar broadcast. "You are outnumbered 50-1. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Captain Phillips's response came back immediately. "This is Captain Dan Phillips of the United Earthship Retribution. You have 30 seconds to leave this system or I will consider you hostile." Gorthmar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. 30 seconds? Human, I could destroy your little ship with one weapon." 20 seconds, Phillips replied calmly. "Fire all weapons." Gorthmar commanded. The Kron battle group opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and missile volleys filled the space where the human ship had been. But the Retribution was no longer there. "Where did it go?" Gorthmar demanded. His answer came in the form of explosions across his fleet. The human ship had somehow moved through space faster than Kron sensors could track. Weapons that the galaxy had never seen before tore through Kron shields like they were made of paper. The Retribution fired what looked like small silver spheres at the Kron ships. When the spheres hit, entire sections of the alien warships simply ceased to exist, leaving perfect spherical holes in their hulls. "Impossible," Gorthmar whispered as he watched his mighty fleet being torn apart by a single human vessel. Captain Phillips's voice came over the communication system again. "I warned you. Now you leave, or you don't leave at all." Of the 50 ships that had entered the system, only 12 limped away. On New Terra, Beth Carter watched the battle from the colony's observation deck. She had seen the Kron ships arrive and feared the worst. Now she watched their broken remains drifting in space while the human warship hung in orbit like a protective guardian. "Mom?" her daughter asked. "Are we safe now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Beth replied, tears in her eyes. "I think we are." But the real shock came when the colony's communication system activated and Dr. Helen Rodriguez appeared on every screen. She was broadcasting from Earth to the entire galaxy. "People of the galactic community," Dr. Rodriguez began, "you have been told lies about humanity for decades. You were told we come from a death world. You were told we are primitive and violent. You were told we are lucky to receive your mercy." She paused, letting her words sink in. "None of that is true. Earth is not a death world by accident. Our planet deliberately shaped us into what the universe needed. While your species specialized in single environments, we became generalists. While you learned to avoid danger, we learned to overcome it. Images filled the broadcast showing human colonies on worlds that other species considered uninhabitable. Humans working in the crushing gravity of heavy worlds. Humans building cities in the frozen vacuum of asteroid belts. Humans thriving in conditions that would kill most galactic species within minutes. You called us Deathworlders because you feared what we might become," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "We accepted that name because we hoped you would learn to see us as equals. But you never wanted equals. You wanted servants." Commander Paul Evans was leading the liberation of Mercy Station, a human mining colony that had been under Kron occupation for 2 years. His team of 12 human soldiers moved through the station's corridors with an efficiency that terrified their enemies. The Kron had expected human soldiers to be tough, but clumsy. Instead, they found warriors who moved like shadows and fought like machines. Human battle armor made each soldier stronger than a Kron warrior, but it was their tactical thinking that truly devastated their enemies. "Contact left," whispered Sergeant Tony Brooks into his comm. "I see them," Evans replied. "Amy, circle around. Nick, high ground. Joe, stay with me." The Kron defenders never had a chance. They were fighting soldiers who had trained for this their entire lives. Soldiers whose ancestors had survived everything their harsh world could throw at them. Within 6 hours, Mercy Station was free. The Kron garrison surrendered rather than face total annihilation. Back on the Kron homeworld, War Master Thrakvan received the reports of defeat after defeat. 12 colonies liberated, 3 battle groups destroyed, hundreds of his finest warriors dead or captured. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his advisors. They are just humans. They have no military tradition, no warrior culture. His intelligence, chief, a scarred veteran named Vraktor, looked up from his reports with haunted eyes. Sir, I think we made a terrible mistake. We thought they were weak because they avoided fighting. But they weren't weak. They were holding back. Holding back what? Everything, sir. They were holding back everything. On Earth, President Stone stood in the war room deep beneath the Capitol building. The room was filled with screens showing human fleets moving throughout the galaxy. For 15 years, humanity had been preparing for this day, building ships in hidden shipyards, training soldiers in secret bases, developing weapons that the galaxy could not imagine. Admiral Foster approached her with the latest reports. Madam, President, we've liberated 23 colonies in the past week. Enemy losses are catastrophic. Our losses are minimal. And the other species? Most are staying neutral. A few are asking to join us. The Mashali have offered to provide intelligence on Kron positions. President Stone nodded. Good, but remember, Greg, we're not conquerors, we're liberators. Every species that wants freedom can have it. Every species that wants to keep oppressing others will learn why you don't wake up a sleeping giant. She looked at the main display showing human space. Red dots marked human colonies. Blue dots marked human fleets. Green dots marked liberated worlds. How long? She asked. Until every human colony is free? At current pace, 3 weeks, Madam President. Make it 2. Across the galaxy, the other species watched in growing horror as everything they thought they knew about humans proved to be wrong. The weak Deathworlders were revealing themselves to be the apex predators of the galactic community, and they were just getting started. Warmaster Thrakvan stood before the massive display screen in his command ship, watching the assembled might of the Kron Empire. 2,000 warships filled the space around him, the largest fleet ever gathered in galactic history. Every species that feared humanity had sent ships to join the Armada. This ends today, Thrakvan growled to his officers. The humans got lucky with a few small battles. Now they face the full power of civilized space. His communications officer looked up nervously. Sir, our scouts report only 200 human. Ships approaching Kepler Junction. 200? Thrakvan laughed, a sound like breaking stone. They send 200 ships against our 2,000? Their arrogance will be their destruction. Admiral Claire Bennett stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, looking at the tactical display showing the enemy fleet. Her captains were connected, by secure communications, waiting for her orders. Ladies and gentlemen, she said calmly, today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten human children. Remember New Terra. Remember Mercy Station. Remember every colony they raided and every life they took. Captain Tony Mitchell of the UES Vengeance spoke up from the display. Admiral, we're ready to show them what real warfare looks like. Then let's begin, Bennett replied. The battle at Kepler Junction started like every other space battle in galactic history. The larger fleet spread out in attack formation. The smaller fleet prepared defensive positions. Weapons charged and shields activated. Then everything changed. The human ships didn't fight like anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of trading shots at long range, they moved like living things through space. They used something the aliens didn't understand. Gravity manipulation that let them change direction without slowing down. Captain Mitchell's ship dove straight through the center of the Kron formation, weapons firing constantly. But these weren't the energy beams and missiles that galactic species used. Human weapons reached into the quantum level of reality itself, tearing apart the basic structure of matter. A Kron battleship that had survived 100 battles simply came apart when hit by a quantum torpedo. Not exploded, came apart as if someone had carefully taken it to pieces and scattered the parts across space. Impossible, Thrakvan shouted as he watched his mighty fleet being destroyed by forces he couldn't understand. Our shields should stop everything they have. Sir, his tactical officer reported, voice shaking. Their weapons ignore our shields completely. They're attacking the ships themselves directly through some kind of subspace manipulation. More ships died. The humans moved through the Kron fleet like sharks through fish. destroying everything they touched. Worse, they fought with a cold efficiency that terrified the alien warriors. No anger, no battle cries, just systematic destruction. Captain Sarah Wells of the UES Justice cornered a group of fleeing Kron ships near a gas giant. Instead of destroying them quickly, she opened a communication channel. Kron vessels, this is Captain Wells. You have two choices. Surrender now, and be treated according to galactic law or be destroyed completely. You have 30 seconds to decide. The Kron commander tried to rally his ships for one last attack. We are Kron. We do not surrender to Deathworld scum. Wrong choice, Captain Wells replied. The Kron ships died so fast their emergency beacons didn't have time to activate. On Velhari Prime, the elegant towers and golden palaces of the galactic elite were in chaos. Lord Plixandor sat in his private study, watching his fortune disappear from his personal accounts in real time. Maria Santos had spent 5 years working as an economic analyst on Earth, studying every trade agreement and financial arrangement between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Now she was putting that knowledge to work. All human colonies are simultaneously defaulting on debts to Velhari banks, she reported to President Stone via secure communication. We're also seizing all Velhari assets in human space under war reparations clauses. How bad is the damage to their economy? President Stone asked. Catastrophic. It turns out the Velhari banking system was built on the assumption that human colonies would keep paying artificially high prices for basic goods while selling their resources at artificially low prices. We've been subsidizing their entire civilization for decades. Lord Plixandor watched his screens in horror as the numbers continued to fall. His family had been wealthy for 1,000 years, built on the exploitation of younger species. Now it was all gone in a matter of hours. His assistant, a young Velhari named Kexara, entered the study with more bad news. My lord, the human economist, Santos has released detailed records of every exploitative trade deal we've made in the past century. She's broadcasting them to the entire galaxy. Can we stop her? No, my lord. The broadcasts are coming from human space, and their communication networks are far more advanced than we realized. On 12 different worlds, species that had been quietly exploited for generations saw the proof of what had been done to them. The Mishali discovered that the Velhari had been buying their rare minerals for 1% of their actual value. The Zephyrians learned that the Kron had been taking 90% of their agricultural output as protection fees. Revolution spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Nick Barnes led a team of human intelligence operatives on a mission that would have been impossible just weeks earlier. They infiltrated the Galactic Council's central database on Nexus Station, now defended by only a skeleton crew since most security forces had been sent to fight humanity. I'm in, Nick reported to his team as he accessed the Council's most secret files. Holy stars, you need to see this. The files contained centuries of records showing how the civilized species had systematically suppressed younger races. Deliberate contamination of colony worlds to keep populations small. Sabotage of developing technologies to prevent competition. Even planned famines to control unruly species. Send it all, Nick told his communications specialist. Every species in the galaxy needs to see what their civilized leaders have been doing. Within hours, the revelations were spreading across galactic networks. Species that had blamed themselves for their failures discovered they had been victims of deliberate sabotage. The careful order that the galactic elite had maintained for centuries began to crumble. Back at Kepler Junction, Admiral Bennett surveyed the aftermath of the battle. Of the 2,000 ships that had attacked her fleet, fewer than 100 had escaped. The space around the junction was filled with debris and rescue pods. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender signals from multiple species. The Altarian Republic wants to negotiate. The Centauri Federation is asking for a ceasefire. What about the Kron? War Master Thrakfons. Ship escaped but barely. Long-range sensors show their remaining forces retreating to their home system. Admiral Bennett nodded. Signal the fleet. We're going after them. It's time to finish this. Captain Mitchell's voice came over the communication. System. Admiral, are we really going to attack their homeworld? No, Captain. We're going to liberate it. Every species deserves freedom from tyrants, even the Kron people themselves. On Earth, President Stone received reports from across human space. Every human colony was now free. Enemy fleets were in full retreat. The galactic economy was collapsing as species realized they had been living off stolen wealth. "Madam President," Admiral Foster said, "we've won. The question now is what we do with victory." President Stone looked out at the city below, thinking of all the human children who would grow up in a galaxy where they were free to reach for the stars without asking permission. "We build something better," she said finally. "We show them that strength doesn't have to mean oppression, that the strong can protect the weak instead of exploiting them. And if they refuse to learn?" President Stone's expression hardened. "Then they'll discover that humanity has been very, very patient for a very, very long time, and our patience has limits." Across the galaxy, the old order was dying. The species that had ruled through fear and exploitation were learning what it felt like to be afraid themselves. And humanity, the supposedly primitive Deathworlders, were showing everyone what real civilization looked like. The galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Grace Thompson walked into what had once been the Galactic Council chamber. The golden seats and fancy decorations were gone. In their place were simple chairs arranged in a circle, with no species sitting higher than any other. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat waiting for her. Some were species humanity had never heard of before the war. Others were former enemies who had learned hard lessons about the cost of oppression. "Friends," Grace began, her voice carrying easily through the smaller chamber, "we gather today not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals building a better future." A small creature with blue fur and large eyes raised her hand. This was Whisper of Stars, leader of the Mishali people. "Ambassador Thompson, our people have suffered under Kron rule for 3 centuries. How do we know this will be different?" Grace smiled gently. "Because this time, no one species rules the others. The charter we're proposing gives every world the right to govern itself. No more tribute payments. No more forced labor. No more calling some species primitive while others are civilized." Alex Morgan, the human legal expert, stood up and activated a hologram showing the new galactic charter. "Every species gets 1 vote, regardless of how many worlds they control or how advanced their technology is. Decisions that affect everyone must be agreed to by everyone." A tall, thin alien with silver skin spoke up. This was Harmony of Thoughts, representing the recently liberated Zephyrian worlds. "What about military protection? Our people cannot defend themselves against raiders and pirates." "That's where the Coalition Defense Force comes in," Grace replied. "Any species can request protection, and any species can contribute ships and personnel. But no one is forced to fight and no one fights alone." On the Mishali homeworld, Joe Collins was helping to set up the first interspecies joint colony. Human engineers worked alongside Mishali builders, creating something that neither species could have built alone. "The atmosphere processor should be online in 2 days," reported Sam Parker, who had left his military career to become a colonial engineer. "Once that's running, we can start the farming sections." Whisper of Stars looked out at the construction with wonder. "In all our history, we never dreamed of changing the very air of a world. Your people make the impossible seem simple." "It's not just us," Sam replied. "Your people understand this world's weather patterns better than our computers do. Without Mishali knowledge, our technology would be worthless here." The joint colony was becoming a symbol of what cooperation could accomplish. Human technology and Mishali wisdom working together to create something neither could achieve alone. But not everyone was ready to accept the new order. General Vraktor crouched in the asteroid field near the Kron homeworld, planning his next attack. He had gathered the remaining hardline Kron military forces who refused to accept defeat. "The soft-skins think they have won," he growled to his officers. "They think their mercy makes them strong. We will show them the price of weakness." His target was a human medical station that was treating wounded soldiers from all species, including Kron prisoners of war. Vraktor believed that attacking it would prove human compassion was a fatal flaw. He was about to learn why that was a mistake. Colonel Linda Brown commanded the security force protecting the medical station. She had been born on Mars in the asteroid mining colonies where every breath of air had to be fought for. The vacuum of space was not her enemy. It was her home. Hostile contacts approaching, her sensor operator reported. 12 Kron raiders, trying to use the asteroid field for cover. Linda smiled grimly. They're trying to hide in an asteroid field from humans? That's like trying to hide in water from fish. Her security ships moved through the asteroids like they were swimming through familiar currents. The Kron raiders, designed for open space combat, struggled to navigate the floating rocks and debris. This is Colonel Brown to Kron vessels, she broadcast. You are attacking a medical facility protected under galactic law. Surrender now or face the consequences. Fraktor's response was to open fire on the medical station itself. The battle that followed lasted exactly 7 minutes. When it was over, 8 Kron ships were destroyed and 4 had surrendered. Fraktor's own ship was captured intact, with the general himself taken prisoner. Why? Linda asked him as human medics treated his wounds. Why attack a hospital? Fraktor stared at her with hatred. Because you make us weak. Your mercy, your compassion, it infects our young people. They begin to think there is another way besides strength. There is another way, Linda replied. That's what we're trying to show you. On Velhari Prime, former aristocrat Lady Vexiana finished her shift at the component manufacturing plant. Her elegant hands, once soft from a life of luxury, were now calloused from honest work. She rode the public transport home alongside workers from a dozen different species. A year ago, she would have been horrified at the thought of sharing space with lesser beings. Now she was learning their names and hearing their stories. Lady Vexiana, said her supervisor, a stocky human named Pete Wilson. The quality control report came back on your work. Top marks again. Thank you, Supervisor Wilson, she replied. I am still learning, but I find satisfaction in creating something useful. Pete smiled. You know, you don't have to call me supervisor. Pete is fine. Vexiana nodded slowly. The concept of casual equality was still new to her, but she was beginning to understand its value. Then please call me Vex. I think I would like that. The transformation wasn't just happening on former enemy worlds. Throughout the galaxy, species that had been enemies for generations were learning to work together. Steve Adams, chief of the Human Diplomatic Corps, established his headquarters on a neutral space station at the galaxy's center. His staff included representatives from 30 different species, all working toward the same goal of lasting peace. The Altarian Republic has agreed to share their medical technology, reported his assistant, a young woman named Kelly Brooks. In exchange, the Centauri Federation will provide mining equipment for the Altarian colonies. What about the trade? Disputes between the Zephyrians and the Mishali? Resolved. Turns out the whole conflict was based on artificial scarcity created by Velhari manipulation. Once both species had access to fair markets, the problem disappeared. Steve nodded with satisfaction. It's amazing how many problems solve themselves when you remove exploitation from the equation. The most important change was happening on the former enemy homeworlds themselves. Rachel Kim led teams of human engineers who were sharing military technology with any species that requested it. Remember, she told her teams, we're not just giving them weapons. We're giving them the ability to defend themselves so they never have to rely on bullies for protection again. On the Kron homeworld, she worked with Kron engineers who had spent their lives building tools of conquest. Now they were learning to build tools of protection. This defensive shield technology, asked Kron engineer Thekmar, it can protect civilian populations. That's exactly what it's for, Rachel replied. No more need for military raids to gather resources. No more need to conquer others to feel secure. Thekmar studied the technical specifications with growing amazement. Your people could have used this to conquer the galaxy. Instead, you give it away freely. Conquest is temporary, Rachel explained. Protection lasts forever. We'd rather have friends than subjects. Back on Earth, President Stone received daily reports about the galaxy's transformation. Species that had been at war for centuries were signing peace treaties. Worlds that had been stripped of resources were being restored. Children who had grown up as slaves were learning to read. "It's working," Admiral Foster told her during their weekly briefing. "The coalition of free worlds now includes over 200 species. Trade is flourishing. Conflicts are being resolved through negotiation instead of warfare. Any remaining resistance? Scattered groups of extremists, but they're losing support. It's hard to rally people for war when peace is bringing prosperity." President Stone looked out at the stars visible through her office window. "Greg, do you think we did the right thing? All that destruction, all those lives lost?" Admiral Foster was quiet for a moment before answering. "Madam President, my daughter sent me a message yesterday. She's part of the first mixed crew exploring beyond the galactic rim. Humans, Mishali, even some reformed Kron working together to discover new worlds." He paused, then continued. "A year ago, she couldn't leave Earth without being treated as a second-class citizen. Now she's helping to expand the frontiers of known space as an equal partner with species from across the galaxy. I think we did exactly what needed to be done." President Stone nodded. "Then let's keep building. The galaxy has room for everyone, and everyone deserves a chance to reach for the stars." Outside, the lights of the city twinkled like earthbound stars, each one representing lives that were now free to dream of tomorrow without fear of oppression. The age of exploitation was over. The age of cooperation had begun. 1 year after the war ended, a young Mishali student named Swift of Mind raised her hand in class. Her teacher, Harmony of Thoughts, smiled and nodded for her to speak. "Teacher," Swift of Mind asked, "my grandmother tells stories about the terrible Deathworlders who came from the dark between stars. But the humans I know are kind and helpful. Were the old stories wrong?" Harmony of Thought sat down among her students, as was the new way of teaching. "The stories were not wrong, little one, but they were not complete. Yes, humans come from a world that would kill most of us in minutes. Yes, they are dangerous beyond imagining when threatened. But the real truth is more wonderful than any old story." She activated a hologram showing images from across the galaxy. Humans working alongside aliens, building colonies, sharing technology, exploring new worlds together. The humans were never the monsters, Swift of Mind. They were the cure for the real monsters who ruled us for so long. The old leaders wanted us to fear the Deathworlders because they knew that if we became friends with humans, we would learn what real strength looks like. On Velhari Prime, Vex sat in her small apartment after another day at the manufacturing plant. She was writing in her personal journal, something she had started doing to understand the changes in her life. "Today I worked alongside a human named Mike Chen," she wrote. "He showed me a more efficient way to assemble the communication components. When I thanked him, he said we were a team and teams help each other. I am beginning to understand why my people lost the war. We spent so long thinking we were superior that we forgot how to learn from others." She paused in her writing and looked out her window at the city below. The golden towers of the aristocracy were being converted into schools and hospitals. The artificial scarcity that had kept most Velhari in poverty was gone, replaced by honest work and fair distribution of resources. "I was taught that serving others was beneath me," she continued writing. "Now I discover that serving alongside others gives life meaning I never knew existed." On the Kron homeworld, former warrior Grak Hun finished his shift at the Joint Research Station where humans and Kron worked together to develop new technologies. His partner was Sergeant Mike Turner, a human Marine who had fought against Kron forces during the war. "Grak Hun," Mike said as they reviewed the day's test results, "your people's understanding of metallurgy is incredible. This new alloy we developed could revolutionize ship construction." "I still do not understand," Grak Hun replied, his massive form hunched over the data display. "We were enemies. I tried to kill humans like you. Why do you work with me as an equal?" Mike looked up from his work. "Because the war wasn't about Kron versus humans, it was about freedom versus oppression. Most of your people were just following orders from leaders who had forgotten that strength should protect, not conquer. But we called you weak for avoiding conflict. We weren't weak, Grak Hun. We were patient. There's a difference." Mike smiled. Besides, you've seen what humans can do when we stop being patient. Do you really think that came from weakness? Grakhun made the Kron sound of deep thought. No. I think you were strong enough to choose mercy when you could have chosen destruction. That is a strength my people are still learning. Far from the established worlds, Captain Lisa Ward stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, humanity's newest deep space exploration vessel. Her crew included representatives from 12 different species, all volunteers for the mission to explore beyond the galaxy's edge. Captain, reported her navigation officer, a young Zephyrian named Gentlewind. We're approaching the coordinates for the first survey site. Thank you, Gentlewind. Science team, are you ready? Dr. Elena Rodriguez, daughter of the famous Dr. Helen Rodriguez, looked up from her instruments. All sensors are active, Captain. We're about to become the first beings from our galaxy to study this region of space. And the cultural team? Ready to document everything, replied Professor Kevin Walsh, the mission's anthropologist. If we encounter new forms of life, we want to make sure we approach them with respect. Captain Ward nodded with satisfaction. A year ago, such a mission would have been impossible. The old galactic powers would never have allowed different species to work together on something so important. Now, cooperation was the foundation of everything they did. Take us in, she ordered. As the horizon moved deeper into unexplored space, Captain Ward thought about the journey that had brought them here. Humanity had spent decades trying to prove they deserved a place among the stars. In the end, they had discovered they were meant to lead the way to new ones. She activated her personal log and began to record. Captain's log, stardate 2388-145. The UES Horizon continues its mission to explore the space beyond our galactic rim. Our mixed species crew represents everything we've accomplished since the war ended. She paused, looking out at the unknown stars ahead. I've been thinking about what we learned during the conflict. The galaxy thought Deathworlders were dangerous because we came from a harsh world. They were wrong about why, but right about the danger. We're dangerous because we never forgot that every world can be home, if you're willing to work for it. We're dangerous because we believe every species can be family if you treat them with respect. And we're dangerous because any threat to our people, any species we've chosen to protect, will face the full measure of human determination. Back on Earth, President Stone sat in her garden reading reports from across the galaxy. The news was almost universally good. Trade was flourishing between former enemies. Scientific discoveries were being shared freely. Art and culture were spreading to worlds that had never known beauty. Her granddaughter Amy ran up to her with a drawing she had made in school. It showed humans and aliens working together to build a space station among the stars. Grandma, Amy said, my teacher says you helped make the galaxy safe for everyone. Is that true? President Stone hugged her granddaughter and looked at the drawing. I helped, sweetheart, but it took many people from many worlds working together. That's the most important lesson. No one species is strong enough to build a better future alone. Will there be more wars? I hope not, Amy, but if there are, they won't be like the old wars. Now when there's trouble, everyone works together to solve it. That evening, President Stone stood in her office one last time before retiring from politics. She had served her people through the most important period in human history, and now it was time for younger leaders to guide humanity's future. Admiral Foster joined her as she watched the sunset through her window. Any regrets, Madam President? Only one, she replied. I wish we could have found another way to teach them. But sometimes the only language bullies understand is strength. And now? Now they speak the language of cooperation. The galaxy is finally growing up. Admiral Foster nodded. What do you think historians will say about all this? President Stone smiled. I think they'll say humanity did what it always does. We saw a problem that needed solving, and we solved it. The galaxy wanted us to stay in our place and be grateful for scraps. Instead, we showed them what their place could be if they were willing to earn it through respect instead of fear. She picked up a framed photo from her desk. The crew of the UES Horizon, humans and aliens standing together before their historic mission. Greg, for 1,000 years, the galaxy told stories about dangerous Deathworlders. Now they'll tell stories about the day those Deathworlders chose to stop being nice and started being fair. And that made all the difference. Outside, the first stars were becoming visible in the darkening sky. Each one represented worlds where former enemies now worked as friends, where children of different species played together, where the future held promise instead of fear. The age of human patience had ended. The age of human leadership had begun, and the galaxy was better for it.